In the world of AI, we kind of just assume that newer and more powerful ideas are always going to be faster, right? But today, we're diving into this super fascinating corner of language models where that whole idea gets turned completely on its head. Let's get into this paradox. So here it is, the central puzzle we're going to unpack today. What if the AI model that should be faster on paper, the one designed for all this parallel processing, is actually getting totally smoked in the speed department by its older one word at a time cousin? I know, it sounds impossible, but it is exactly what's happening right now. Okay, so to really understand this paradox, we first need to meet the reigning champion of text generation. This is the tech that powers most of the large language models we're all using every single day. They're called autoregressive models, or AR models for short. And the main thing you need to get here is that they work a lot like a person writing. They start with the first word, then they think about what the second word should be, then the third, and on and on. It's a very logical one after the other process. So the model takes an input, something like the, and it generates the next word, maybe cat. Then it takes that whole phrase, the cat, and it generates the next word, sleeps. You can see what's happening, right? Every new word is built on the complete context of everything that came before it. It's methodical and, as we're about to see, it's surprisingly efficient. So you might be thinking, if it's generating one word at a time, why isn't it just painfully slow? Well, the answer is this really clever trick called the KV cache. See, instead of recalculating the meaning of the entire sentence every single time it adds a new word, it stores the important calculations from the previous steps. Think of it like a cheat sheet. This cache just gets rid of a huge amount of redundant work, and it makes that sequential process incredibly fast in the real world. All right, now let's meet the challenger. This is a completely different way of thinking about text generation, one that, on paper, should just leave that old one-word-at-a-time method in the dust. So these are diffusion language models, or DLMs, and instead of writing a sentence, they generate the entire thing all at once in parallel. Just try to picture a whole paragraph appearing at the same time, starting as a blur of random static, and then gradually sharpening into a perfectly clear thought. This is my favorite way to think about it. If an AR model is a writer, carefully putting a sentence together word by word, a diffusion model is a sculptor. It starts with this rough, noisy block of just potential words, and in a series of steps, it chips away all the noise to reveal the final, perfect text that was hidden inside all along. But how on earth does it learn to do that? Well, it's this really cool two-part process. First, during training, you have what's called the forward process. You take a perfect sentence and you deliberately mess it up, step by step, until it's just random noise. Then you teach the model the reverse process. Its one and only job is to learn how to perfectly undo that damage, to turn that noise back into the original, clean text. Let's look at an example. You might start with the sentence, Salman is a boy, at, let's say, time 0. As you move forward in time, words get swapped out for a generic mask token. And by the end, you see the original sentence is just gone. The model's entire training is just getting really, really good at reversing this exact journey. So, okay, we've got the writer generating one word at a time. And we've got the sculpture creating everything all at once. The sculpture has to be faster, right? Well, this is where theory crashes headfirst into reality. And this right here is the paradox. The entire promise of diffusion models for text is that generating all the words in parallel will be way more efficient than the old sequential way. But in practice, when you actually put them on the clock, the one word at a time AR models aren't just a little bit faster, they are dramatically faster. How much faster are we talking about? One study found that a comparable AR model had an inference throughput, that's basically its speed, a staggering 13.7 times greater than a top-of-the-line diffusion model. That's not just a small difference, that is a total blowout. And when you look at it on a chart, measuring the throughput in tokens per second, it's not even close. The AR model is way out in front. Diffusion models, they're all the way at the bottom. You can even see this hybrid block diffusion model in the middle, but it still can't even begin to close that gap. So the big question is, why? All right, let's pop the hood and figure out the technical reasons behind this absolutely wild result. Why is the parallel sculptor so much slower than the sequential writer? Well, it all comes down to how much work each model has to do, and what kind of resources that work really needs. So this all basically breaks down into 3 key differences. First, you see flops per token. That's just a fancy way of measuring raw computational work.
And for every single word it generates, the diffusion model does a massive amount of work. The R model, because of that KV cache we talked about, does very little, and that leads to the hardware bottleneck. Because the DLM is doing all this heavy lifting, it very quickly maxes out the GPU's raw processing power. It becomes compute-bound. The AR model, though, is so efficient that its limit isn't processing power, it's how fast it can grab stuff from memory, making it memory-bound. So, the bottom line is pretty simple, actually. The sculptor's approach, while it sounds amazing in theory, is just too demanding right now. Each one of those parallel refinement steps needs so much computational brute force that it completely wipes out the advantage of doing everything at once. And meanwhile, the writer's one-word-at-a-time method is so lean and so optimized with that KV cache that it ends up just lapping the sculptor in a real-world race. But this story isn't over, not by a long shot. This paradox hasn't stopped researchers. If anything, it's inspired them. They are already coming up with some brilliant ways to close this gap and finally unlock the true potential of generating in parallel.
So, the race to make the sculptor faster is officially on, and it's heading in a few really exciting directions. We're seeing hybrid models, like that block diffusion one, which try to get the best of both worlds by generating text in chunks, kind of like a sculptor carving one part of a statue at a time. Others are inventing clever new caching systems like the dual cache, basically trying to give the sculptor the writer's secret weapon to cut down on that massive computational load. And some are just making the process smarter, with new strategies that can figure out which words are already correct and then focus all the GPU's power on the ones that still need some work. So this leaves us with this incredible question for the future of AI. Will the next generation of language models keep thinking like an author? Carefully crafting sentences one piece at a time? Or will these new innovations finally let them work like a sculptor, revealing entire passages of text all at once and finally solving this great speed paradox? The race is on, and honestly, the outcome is anything but certain.